Greetings and welcome to our show, Fresh Geek Context. This is a podcast where we routinely discuss the insightful views on a bi-weekly basis over the incredibly nerdy things we can't stop talking about. To take you on this dorky ride are your hosts, Josh.
Yellow.
And myself, Jay. So why don't you take a seat, sit back, relax. We're here to do all the heavy lifting. It's about to get nerdy. So this is episode 1.
Introductions.
And intentions. So at this point, Josh, we should probably explain who we are and why are we doing this, because that may be confusing to some of our listeners who are just popping in for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. And welcome, by the way, everyone listening. So, it's essentially we're here to start this new podcast. We decided that it was finally time because this is something that's been going on for a very, very long time in the making, essentially. We kind of joked about making a podcast and kind of casually mentioned it over the years, but thought it was finally time to come out and just make one, and here we are.
Okay. So why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about, you, and we'll go into my introduction and then further go into our intention for this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. So, hello everyone. My name is Josh. I am what you would consider a normal geek, I guess. I've been into video games, comic books, movies, TV shows, anything sci-fi, geeky related for a very, very long time now. It kind of started when I was a child, as most things do. My sister got me into gaming. My brother got me into my comic bookness. And then I kind of got myself into movies. So when I was little, like around, 2-3 years old, I started finally paying attention to what was happening like on the TV and everything. And I would watch a specific movie over and over again. And that movie was Back to the Future. And at 3 years old, mind you. So after the movie would finish, I would just be like, again. And then my sister would rewind it because this is VHS land now. So she had to rewind it, and then I would start watch it all the way through, and she would have to sit there with me too. And then after it was over, I was like, again, and then she just rewound it, and then we just kept watching it over and over and over. And essentially it's my drug now. I love Back to the Future. It's so great.
Okay, fair enough.
And then like I said, my brother got me into comic books. He's a huge Superman fan. However, he happened to have some Spider-Man comics laying around, too.
That one lone Spider-Man comic.
And it was a Spider-Man, which one was it? It was one of the Maximum Carnage series as well. I think it was like...
God.
Yeah. That one, I just loved the cover of it. I was like, what's this? And then I kind of took it from there. So that's where my love for Spider-Man is now. And, I can't get enough of the wall crawler. And then again, going back to my sister, she got me my first PlayStation. So from then on, I've been a nice PlayStation Sony head, I guess. So I've had every single one of Sony's consoles, including the PSP and the Vita.
Okay.
I kind of wish I didn't buy the Vita, but I like it. It's still fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So my question for you now.
Yeah. What's up?
Is. What is your favorite piece of nostalgia that does not stand the test of time?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know what? So, going back to my love of video games, and love of movies. However, sometimes they don't pair up quite well.
I may not like where this is going.
So, in the 90s, there were a few different games based on movies.
I don't like where this is going.
One of them being based on a fighting game.
Oh, no.
And they have a very big problem with spelling things that normally begins with C with a K.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I love the Mortal Kombat movie. It does not stand the test of time at all.
It really doesn't.
However, that is one of my movies that I can't get enough of. I will watch that willingly all the time.
Well, So my question is, when was the last time you watched that movie?
Maybe 2, 3 months ago.
Wow, really? You just
Very, very recent. Very recent.
you were a hardcore
I
fan.
wouldn't say hardcore, but I mean, dude, come on. That Liu Kang versus Reptile scene, it's awesome.
2 months ago. So here's the thing. I watched that movie in theaters. I remember that consciously, and looking at the world through rose tinted
Of
lenses,
course.
everything seems wonderful. And I remember watching that movie and thinking to myself, this is amazing. And then I got home and I started thinking about it. And then I remember buying it on DVD when it came out.
Yep.
And that movie was awful. I mean, that fight scene between Liu Kang and Reptile was amazing.
It's probably the highlight of the movie, honestly.
No, that's not the highlight. The highlight of that movie is the soundtrack.
Very true. Yeah, no, that soundtrack is dope. I love it.
That soundtrack is my favorite part.
I mean, it's a very good soundtrack. I'll listen to it in the car every once in a while, I'm not going to lie.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Jace.
Yes, sir.
It is now your turn, sir. Why don't you tell the audience who you are?
Sure. My name is Jace Rockland. I am also a geek. I have been a geek for a very long time. I like many of the things that you like, and as you were explaining some of the things that you love, I kind of realized why we are friends because we kind of align on many of the things that we like. I, too, was a kid when I first watched Back to the Future, and my older brother would just roll his eyes every single time I would just rewind that movie. So that was like, I think, my first conscious love. I was just like, I need to have this every single moment of my life. And my mother had told me that he wasn't just watching it, he was studying it. So, and it's true because it's like, I watched that movie today and there's still new things that I have never seen before. And that kind of led me into my love for movies in general. So I'm a big Disney fan. I will rewatch all of the Disney classics from the '90s. I do watch a little bit from the earlier periods, the '70s and the '80s as well. But my favorite movies is Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, all of those movies that came out because those are clearly, I think, the best works that Disney has ever come out with.
That's fair to say.
Yeah, I think so. And I, too, am also a comic book fan. I didn't go the Spider-Man route, though. It could have gone either one of two ways. It could have gone either Superman or X-Men. And it was clearly X-Men because, number one, they had the better comic book covers in the '90s. And number two, X-Men stories as a whole, back then anyway, I don't know about now. We're not going to talk about now because this is the intro podcast, of course. But I really enjoyed what the X-Men series kind of did at that time. The dynamics between mutants against humans and different points of views over how they should exist in the world of humans. I thought that was amazing.
Right.
And so I became a big fan of that, the X-Men cartoon, and eventually the X-Men movies, which kind of tapered off, but, that's neither here or there. And I am also into video games as well. And I'd say my favorite video game character was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Good choice.
Thank you very much. I remember getting the Sega Genesis back in the '90s and just being blown away by the amount of fun that I had consistently, probably for the next decade. I mean, even when the newer systems started coming out, I always went back to the Sega Genesis because it was so much fun for me. But yeah, those are my big three, and lots of other things. Reading books, big Harry Potter fan, big humongous Harry Potter fan.
Oh yeah, I'm a pretty good fan of them too. I have all the books. I just got the latest one. I bought all the movies on iTunes recently.
Excellent. Yeah, I did too.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's definitely really, really good time to be a Potter fan, with the new book and stuff. I kind of want to see that play, honestly.
I do too.
Well, Mr. Jace, you asked me, so I'm going to ask you. So what is your favorite piece of nostalgia that doesn't stand the test of time?
I thought about it for you, but I didn't think to answer for myself.
Well, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So I have an answer, but you may not like what I have to say.
All right, hit me. Let's go.
Okay. All right. There was an old '80s cartoon
Okay.
that used to play,
Sure.
and it featured a lot of cats
Okay.
in space.
Samurai Pizza Cats.
No, no, no. It wasn't Samurai Pizza Cats. It was Thundercats.
I'm sorry, what?
I said Thundercats. Now,
I think
bef-
you need to clean your mic, or I need to clean my headphones one more
no,
time.
no, 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 no. I will say Thundercats, and I will explain why.
Hmm.
What you are thinking about is the rocking '80s theme song. You're thinking about the guitar solo. You're thinking about all of the action, and you're thinking about Lion-O and his sword. You're thinking about Panthro kicking the screen. You're thinking about Tagara, and you're thinking about Chitara. Um, you're thinking about the twins, and you're thinking about even Snarf. And I'm a fan of Snarf, even though he didn't really do much in the story.
I was totally thinking of Snarf and Snarf alone, just so you know.
No, 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 no. I love all of those characters. I really do. My problem with that show is after the titles roll, everything seems very, very stiff, and it doesn't feel the same as the theme song. They put all of their effort into that theme song because that's what catches you, right? And then after it
Caught me.
catches you, exactly, and you watch the whole series because I know I did. I have it on DVD. I watch it often, and the story is there, but the action just doesn't hold up as much as it does for that theme song. And that's why I believe that's my favorite piece of nostalgia. Probably one of my favorite cartoons that doesn't stand the test of time.
We just started this podcast, and I feel like you already pissed off so many listeners with that.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. We'll talk more about, nostalgia and the power that it has over our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, nostalgia is a very powerful thing. Like, you remember something so well from your childhood, and just like you said, you go back to it, and then you kind of go, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought. However, Thundercats does not fall under that category, and therefore you are wrong, sir.
It doesn't fall in the category for you. I think we could probably agree on He-Man.
Okay, that we can totally agree on.
But that is not my favorite cartoon and my favorite piece of nostalgia. That's just awful.
No, I agree. That is not one of my favorites at all.
No, but I mean, I'll watch it every once in a while, but I have to skip forward.
I was actually more a fan of Thundar the Barbarian than I was He-Man.
I agree with you. So we should probably start this podcast now and
Yeah,
tell
definitely.
everybody why we're here. So the intention of this podcast started years ago when we watched a midnight show. I believe it was Avengers.
I think you're right, yeah.
And we spoke outside that theater for about an hour.
Something
And
like that, yeah.
And we were talking, and I think once we hit the 1 minute marker, probably like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you said we should start a podcast because it fit in time with the amount of time that we were discussing this movie.
Pretty much, yeah. So after that, we kind of talked about it a little bit. Like I would casually mention it to you, like, "Hey, Jace, we should start a podcast."
Yeah, absolutely.
And you would kind of agree, but we would never do anything about it at all. It wasn't until, when was it? A few weeks ago now at this point. I was sitting down with a friend of mine. She was kind of, looking for new jobs and stuff like that. And we kind of started talking about, our future. And essentially, she kind of sparked something in my head that said, you know what? We should really do this. And then what I did was I was like, all right, I'll be right back. I sat down on the couch, texted you, and then I pretty much said, hey, you know what? Let's do this for real. Let's go ahead and actually do this. And, a few weeks of prep, and here we are.
Yeah, it was actually really funny when you sent me that message. I had heard from multiple people when I was at work, and everyone had kept telling me, like, you have very interesting ideas, and you have a very interesting way of explaining things. You should start a podcast or a YouTube channel. So I went for the podcast idea only because I think it's the most accessible. It's just easy for me to kind of sit down, record, create a script, and just kind of discuss what are the things that I like to talk about. And that's kind of how this all came together. So, yeah, I'm really excited for all the things that we're going to be talking about in the upcoming months and years, because not only do we have things to talk about, but we have things to catch up on that we never had a chance to discuss with our audience.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a nice new perspective for us and for you guys listening. Hopefully, we get to put a nice little spin on certain things that you love and certain things that not so fond of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know when I speak to people who I know aren't into nerddom. Is that a word?
It's a word.
Okay, nerddom.
We'll call it a word.
We'll call it that. It can get awkward sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I know when I talk to people, and let's say Avengers, right? I get out of that theater and I talk to someone else at work, and I'll be like, "Hey, you saw Avengers? Cool, it was awesome, right? Did you see this part, this part?" And then the other person's just like, "Dude, all right, I get it. It was a good movie. Keep going."
And it just keeps going and going and going,
exactly.
And they're just not picking up anything that you're saying.
Exactly. They don't really care. They were just like, "Yeah, there was a cool explosion." That's about it.
Yeah, but it was so much more than that.
Definitely.
So the primary purpose of this show is an education for the things that we find cool so you can find the cool.
And then you can share this podcast with other people.
Yeah. So one of the segments that we have will feature a definition and quick discussion called Learning Time, where we define the term of the topic we are discussing and talk about the origin, purpose, fun facts, so you can share them with your friends. For example,
hey Jace, what's a podcast?
So glad you asked, Josh. A podcast is a digital audio file made available to the internet to download to your portable device or personal computer. Typically, listeners like yourselves can tune in and subscribe for delicious consumption at the listener's convenience. The podcast was invented in the 80s and it was originally called audio blogging. These are audio files become distributed through RSS feeds.
RSS stands for really simple syndication, by the way.
Think of RSS feeds like a postal office ninja delivering all of your favorite things quickly and silently.
In the year 2000, when the internet started to take off, other popular tech devices started to flourish, like MP3 players. Many content creators took this revitalized system to push out content.
So you can think of the efforts of Tristan Lewis and Adam Curry for upgrading the features you can find on the back-end RSS feeds today.
When the iPod took the world by storm, the platform took hold and became known as the term podcast. As with anything Apple does, the platform became popular and more accessible to the masses.
Podcasts are essentially radio broadcasting for the future.
Isn't there a better way to broadcast?
That's an excellent question. The answer is yes, but it depends entirely on the wavelength of your antenna. Terrestrial radio usable waves span several hundred miles depending on the strength of the tower and its elevation. This is why radio stations work a certain distance and internet channels like this podcast and satellite radio can be heard across the world.
Okay. So let's say I'm hanging out with Matthew McConaughey, and Interstellar Matthew McConaughey, by the way. Could I technically listen to a podcast with him?
Then technically yes, but you could receive it if you were on Mars. Actually, if you were outside of our universe, you could hear some broadcasts from planet Earth. But far as I understand, I think with signal loss and degradation, it would make it hard to decipher. But yeah, if you were traveling outside of the universe for several hundred years, you could hear our broadcasts. Yeah.
So what you're saying is there are beings in the universe right now that are starting the first season of Star Trek?
Technically, yes, and technically they're going to be heavily disappointed when they go through all the good shows of the past 60 years.
Yeah, it's going to be bad once they see E.T.
Yeah, E.T. is going to be bad. I would imagine they will also find some online, pirated versions of all the other movies, like Independence Day and all that stuff.
Ooh, Independence Day will be a really bad one. They're going to think that's a sign of war.
Yeah, they're going to think that, or any other alien movies where we just improperly kind of define what alien life is outside of Earth.
What about aliens?
Or what about Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, but if there's an actual talking raccoon, I feel like he would be like, look, they know who I am. So, I don't know. I feel like that would be fine.
I think that's pretty selfish for us to determine that the rest of the world has raccoons that we only have here on Earth.
Listen, raccoons don't have to be exclusive to us,
Listen, if I see another planet and it has raccoons, I'll be very shocked. I want to know more. I have so many questions.
A lot of questions are going to be asked for that.
Yeah, so we should probably get into the thick of it. Josh, why don't you tell me what's happening in Geekland, or whatever we call our things that we talk about in everyday life.
Yeah, definitely. So, this podcast is going to be a whole bunch of different things. We got video games, we got tech, we got comics, we got movies, we got so many things that we could talk about. However, this week coming up, we do have a few things, mainly in tech and in video games.
Okay.
We have two conferences happening in the same day, which we will talk about in future podcasts, of course. Just as soon as they announce their information, we'll gather some info on that and then kind of continue from there. But September 7th, we have a Apple conference, which hopefully they will be announcing possibly a new device, a new iPhone, maybe some watch stuff and some computers. We'll see. And then, of course, they're talking about iOS 10 and OS 10 Sierra. Oh, excuse me, Mac OS Sierra.
We always forget that.
They are cutting down the OS 10 and just going Mac OS.
Okay.
And then, of course, Sony, we got them. They're going to be talking about, hopefully, the PlayStation Neo. And then, of course, their PlayStation Slim, which has been leaking out like crazy lately. Someone even had an unboxing of it, and it was up and running. So we know that's going to be there for sure. The big showcase, of course, is going to be the PlayStation Neo, the PlayStation 4.5, I guess, if you will. So that's going to be the big thing.
So I know Apple stuff. You know Apple stuff.
Definitely.
I know a lot of other people know a lot of Apple stuff. We'll go back to it, obviously, and we'll have another podcast revolving around that. But I have questions for right now.
Yep.
What's a PlayStation Neo? And what's a PlayStation whatever? What did you call it?
The 4.5?
No, you said PlayStation Slim, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so essentially the PlayStation Slim is the same PS4 that you and I both own, that we've played Last of Us and all that on.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially it's just a much thinner version of the machine. Kind of how for every single console they've had the PlayStation 1, and then they had that PS1, the little tiny one. They had the PlayStation 2, and then they had the PS2 Slim, which was the super skinny thing. They had the PlayStation 3, and then they came out with the PS3 Slim, which wasn't as this big, huge, bulky machine that the PlayStation 3 originally was. So they're just kind of following suit with the PlayStation 4 now and the PS4 Slim. So it's just the same console, just a little bit thinner, not as much plastic and stuff going around there. So they can kind of sell it to us at a cheaper price. So let's say if you were waiting a while for a PS4 and you were like, well, the price just isn't there for me, mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure this Slim is going to be what's for you.
Okay, so I don't need to get it if I already own a PS4.
Yeah, so like you and me, we already own a PS4. We're good. We're fine. However, what we may want to own, depending on what Sony says about this new console, would be the PlayStation Neo. So the PlayStation Neo is going to kind of be what Project Scorpio is for Microsoft, and essentially it's their current console, the PS4 or the Xbox One for Microsoft, and they kind of spec it out like crazy. So essentially it's going to be a lot more powerful, it's going to be a lot faster, and it's going to also do 4K output. So that's going to be the big thing, the 4K.
I do love me some 4K.
I do too. However, I currently don't own a 4K TV, so I don't know how much benefit that'll do me. I had the opportunity to buy a 4K TV when I was buying my current one. I opted not to just because the content for 4K isn't quite there yet.
You don't want to be the person kind of leading the charge for the new technology?
Yeah, but at the same time, if you don't, go for the technology, it's not going to grow because nobody's buying it, So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that case.
It is a double-edged sword, but it's very interesting to be an early adopter. Now, for those of you who are listening to this, an early adopter is somebody that sees technology. It's very expensive. You buy it, and essentially it's not as fun because not a lot of people are using it, or there's not a lot of content for it.
Correct.
So, for example, when the Apple Watch came out last year, was it last year?
It was April of 2015, I believe, yeah.
Correct. So I was one of the first early adopters, and I tried it, and it was very interesting. I have never been an early adopter not for a lot of things. I usually I take the wait and see approach, and I see which ones my friends and family are using, and then I kind of jump in. The watch was the first time I was like, need to have it, first in line, got it. And I started using it, and I was like, wow, this is cool, I really like it, and I still do like it. I want to make sure that everyone understands. I love my Apple Watch. But it was really weird in the first few days because a lot of it was the communication kind of piece that you can kind of tap your watch and you can tap somebody else's wrist and you can share your heartbeat with somebody in a message. I thought this was all amazing, but not a lot of my friends had a watch.
Right.
It's very, very lonely being an early adopter.
It can be for sure, and especially it depends on the product too. I am just like you. I go ahead and I wait for the second version of the product usually before I get it.
Sure.
There have only been 2 times I've broken that rule. Just like you, I broke it with the Apple Watch, and then of course I broke it with my current computer that I'm on, the MacBook Pro Retina.
That one came out in 2012, is that correct?
2012, yeah, the very first MacBook Pro Retina. Those are the only 2 times that I kind of did the early adoption.
Excellent. Okay. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. And also, did you hear, because I know you were a huge Batman fan.
Yep.
I am a gigantic Batman fan. Specifically of the games that have been coming out in the last couple of years, known as the Arkham series.
Oh, I love the Arkham series. If you're a Sony person, well, if you're a gamer, all 3 of them, they are platinumed. So, not bragging or anything, but, you know.
No need to brag. But did you hear that they're releasing Batman Return to Arkham?
Yes, so essentially what that is, it's the first 2 Arkham games, the PS3 versions, because they originally came out on the last generation consoles. They're being remastered for the PlayStation 4. Now, Arkham Knight, which is the 3rd version of the game, came out on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but the first 2 games were on the PS3. So now, with this remaster, you can have all 3 of them on one console, which is pretty cool.
So, needless to say, I will be getting that because I just saw the video last night, and it was pretty intense what I saw, and how they were able to make the PlayStation 3 graphics of that game look like garbage. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, it's that up-resing, man. And I think they went back in and they, redid some textures and things of that nature. So with that upgrade, it does look very, very nice. So I'm thinking about getting it. However, also being a trophy hunter, it kind of scares me a little bit if I get it because I have to redo a lot of those challenges. And some of them, oh my God, took me forever to get. Especially the first Batman game, there was a challenge mode. I think it was called Shock and Awe. And if people who have played Arkham, if you're listening, you know exactly which one I'm talking about. Shock and Awe Extreme, I think it was called, the challenge, took forever to beat. So I don't know if I want to put myself through that again. We'll see.
I believe that I did... What did I do? I did the first 2 games, because I haven't played 3, actually. I didn't play...
Really?
I didn't play Arkham Origins. I wanted to.
I skipped that as well.
I heard it was good. I want to go back and maybe try to talk about it on the podcast as seeing things as the title and suggests fresh perspectives.
Yeah, definitely.
But I did not play 3 because I just didn't have a chance to, because life happens. But I do want to pick it up, and I'm going to be picking up the first 2. But that video, Josh, I'm telling you, that video is very interesting to me because it almost feels like they recreated the game at times.
Yeah, definitely. It looks really, really insane. So I might pick it up, honestly. We'll see.
We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So we should wrap this up because this is our intro podcast. We don't want to kind of dive into a new subject. We're kind of enticing listeners that are out there to understand who we are, what we're about, and what we're going to be discussing. The next podcast, we're probably going to talk more about the Sony conference, and most definitely we're going to be talking about that Apple conference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're gonna be here for a while, I hope, and essentially what we hope to bring out is kind of like Jay said, a new perspective on things that we love. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about games, videos. We're going to talk about tech. We're going to talk about pretty much anything in the geek land. And we're going to talk about the good things about them. We're going to talk about the bad things about them. We're going to talk about everything going from the past to the future. We're going to relive our memories on certain things. It's going to be really, really cool. So I hope that you guys are with us and are going to be on this ride with us, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, this should be fun. So,
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's all we have for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll tell you what, if you liked what we had to say, you can follow us on Twitter. I am at Jace Rockland. And Josh?
You can find me at JCA90. You could also find the podcast at FGC Podcast, or email us at freshgeekcontext@gmail.com.
You can also visit our website at freshgeekcontext.com for past episodes, and a teaser will be shown for the next episode. And lastly, if you'd like, you can also subscribe to us on iTunes. All you need to do is go to the podcast section or the podcast app on your iPhone or iPad and click subscribe. So that's all we have for today, guys. Again, this is an interest episode. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Have a good one.